The drive back to Jack's Hill was a blur. I sat in the back of the SUV watching the lights of Kingston flicker and fade as we climbed higher. The higher we went, the more the air felt like it was being sucked out of the cabin. That night, I went into Shane's room. He was sleeping, his little chest rising and falling in perfect, innocent rhythm. I sat on the floor by his crib and wept, not the loud, sobbing grief of a woman who can be comforted, but the silent, rhythmic leaking of a woman who has run out of hope. I looked at the photos on the dresser, the wedding, the baptism. In every one, Anthony was looking at the camera, and I was looking at Anthony. I had made him my son, and in doing so, I had let myself be burnt to ash. "I'm sorry, Shane," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I let him kill the woman who was supposed to protect you." The plan didn't form all at once. It drifted in like the mist over the hills, cold, white, and final. If I stayed, Shane would grow up to be Anthony. He would learn that women are things to be acquired and then discarded. He would learn that love is a weapon. I couldn't let him become the man who destroyed me, and I couldn't leave him behind to be raised by a monster in a silk tie. Chapter 5. The Leap. The morning was too bright. It was a cruel, vibrant Jamaican morning where the bougainvillea bled pink against the white stone walls and the blue mountains stood tall and indifferent in the distance. Anthony had left before dawn, no word, just the lingering scent of his cologne and a sense of relief that followed the closing of the heavy mahogany front door. I moved through the house like a sleeper. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't take the jewelry. I took only Shane. "We're going for a drive, baby," I whispered. He was 2 years old now, full of why and where, mummy. I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. I bypassed the driver. For the first time in years, I took the keys to the SUV myself. Winston started to protest, but I looked at him with a gaze so hollowed out and dead that he stepped back. Maybe he saw the ghost finally leaving the machine. The drive to St. Elizabeth felt like a journey out of a dream. As I left the manicured prison of Jack's Hill and the smog of Kingston, the landscape began to change. The lush green gave way to the rugged, dry beauty of the south. The lignum vitae trees stood stubborn against the heat, and the air began to smell of salt and pimento. I drove for hours. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, flickering like a broken film reel. Anthony's first, no. The way he looked at his watch while I was in labor, the coldness of the marble floors, the way my voice had withered until I couldn't even recognize my own laugh. "Mummy, look, cow!" Shane pointed at the window, his face pressed against the glass. My heart broke. It didn't just break, it shattered into a million jagged pieces that tore at my insides. He was so beautiful. He was so innocent. But I saw the shadow of Anthony in the set of his jaw, and I knew that in this world, in that house, that shadow would grow until it eclipsed everything soft in him. I couldn't leave him to the man who had turned me into a shadow. I couldn't let Anthony win. Lover's Leap. The name felt like a taunt. I parked the car in the gravel lot. The wind here was different. It didn't just blow, it howled, carrying the spray of the Caribbean Sea 1,700 feet below. I unbuckled Shane and held him against my hip. He was heavy, a solid, warm weight that felt like the only real thing in a world of illusions. I walked past the lighthouse, past the tourists who didn't see the woman with the dead eyes, and moved toward the edge of the cliff. The view was breathtaking. The coastline stretched out in a curve of white foam and deep, bruised purple water. It was the edge of the world. "Look at the sea, Shane," I whispered. My voice was finally steady. The trembling had stopped the moment I saw the horizon. "Big water, mummy?" he chirped, clinging to my neck. I looked down. The waves were crashing against the jagged rocks below, a rhythmic, violent pulse. It looked like a door. It looked like the only exit left in a house with no windows. I thought of Anthony. At this moment, he was probably in a meeting, leaning back in his leather chair, deciding the fate of 1,000 workers with a flick of his pen. He would come home to a quiet house. He would be angry first, angry that his asset had gone missing. Then he would be embarrassed. He would worry about the scandal. He would never understand that he had pushed me to this precipice one no at a time. "You can't control this, Anthony," I whispered to the wind. "You can't retire me from this." The turmoil in my chest peaked, a roar of grief and love so intense it felt like it would consume me before the fall did. I kissed the top of Shane's head. He smelt like sun and home, I love you more than the sky, I said, my voice breaking. And I'm taking us home. The wind caught my hair, pulling it back from my face. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like Tia. Not a wife, not a trophy, not a ghost. I felt the power of my own choice. It was a tragic, terrible choice, but it was mine. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath of the salt, thick air, and stepped forward. There was a moment of weightlessness, a terrifying, exhilarating second where the cage finally fell away. And then, there was only the blue, the infinite, silent, peaceful blue. Final chapter, The Awakening of Tia. The raw, powerful waves of the Lover's Leap cliffside faded, their terrifying roar replaced by a steady, synthetic hum. The vibrant, chaotic dream was instantly gone. Tia gasped, her eyes snapping open in the disorienting semi-darkness of her black G-Wagon still parked in a dynamic, rugged Jamaican South Coast location. Through the passenger window, a wild, distorted face was staring at her, tapping incessantly with gnarled knuckles on the wet glass. He was ragged, wild-eyed, and muttering incoherently, a madman. Woman! Woman, wake up! What you doing here? The sea, the cliff! He wasn't a threat, he was a catalyst. His erratic knocking had pulled her from the tragic, liberating loop. Tia stared at him, her chest heaving, a sudden, powerful realization flooding her. The madman had seen, he knew. It wasn't real, she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in years. She had been trapped not just by Anthony, but by the tragedy of her own mind. A new clarity defined her. She didn't fear the madman, nor did she need to jump. Her resolve, now unburdened by the cliff, settled into a deep, purposeful strength. She shifted the massive SUV into drive, giving the madman a steady nod of gratitude as she pulled away, leaving the rugged South Coast behind for the final time. The G-Wagon, now a symbol of her agency, moved with purpose. She drove back to Kingston. She didn't return to the mansion as Anthony's wife, but as Shane's mother. She navigated the driveway of the expansive, white-walled Sterling mansion under bright morning light. The bougainvillea was vibrant, and for the first time Tia saw its beauty, not just the luxury it masked. Winston stood aside, his initial surprise at her return replaced by a subtle, supportive nod as she drove herself up the steps. Inside, the massive floor-to-ceiling mirrors reflected not a hollowed-out void, but a determined woman who had faced the edge and chosen life. The complex, abstract art no longer represented fractured isolation, but the resilient, creative energy she would reclaim. Shane, now awake and happy, was in his nursery, not empty but vibrant. Tia held him close, but her eyes, now steady and strong as she had practiced at the cliff, were steady and powerful. The framed wedding photos on the dresser were still there, but they no longer held her captive. They were just memories of an older life. Later that week, Tia walked into a small, sun-dappled community center. She had joined the Rising Tide, a local Kingston women's support group, a group of diverse Black Jamaican women, radiating professional confidence and distinct, powerful energy welcomed her. They weren't polished dolls or victims. They were survivors. Seated in a circle, bathed in bright morning light, Tia, holding Shane on her hip, spoke for the first time in a circle. Her voice, once weak and strained, was now clear, strong, and unwavering, echoing the defiance she had finally found. "I was on the edge," she said, looking around the supportive circle. "I was drowning in silence. A man who I thought was mad woke me. He showed me the difference between a dream and a choice. Today, I am making a choice. I am reclaiming my life. For me, for my son. My wrist is bare," she glanced down, "and it will stay that way. Until I place a bracelet of my own choice upon it." The women in the group nodded, a collective, powerful energy filling the room. In that bright morning circle, under the vast Jamaican sky, Tia was finally not alone. She had found a new, authentic, powerful life, a quiet, resolute triumph. The final step was not off the cliff, but back into the circle of shared strength. The story was over, and Tia's real life had finally begun.